So this time we're going to be looking at the invitation and challenge matrix, and we're looking at this early for two reasons, partly to set a guideline as how we go in our leadership curriculum and how we live in relationship with each other, and also because it's a tool to help us as leaders and to help us assess our group that we can use going forward. So let me talk you through the matrix. This matrix, invitation challenge matrix, it's probably a relatively common matrix, but we've taken it from the 3DM material, the Building a Discipling Culture by 3DM. So we have two axes. There's the invitation, or you might want to consider that as nurture or support. And this is high invitation, this is low invitation. And then the horizontal one is about challenge or expectations, that type of thing. And because we're talking about discipling leadership throughout this leadership curriculum, what we're aiming for is a really good balance of high invitation, which is about our relationship with each other. Invitation means that you are welcome just as you are. We accept you just as you are. So invitation is about that nurturing relationship, that place of belonging. But we also need to have this balance of good challenge. So you're welcome and accepted as you are, but as disciples of Jesus, we're continually growing. And when we have a good balance of the challenge and the invitation, we have what we call a discipled culture or an enabled culture. When we have high invitation, you are welcome as you are, but we have low challenge. We don't expect you to grow. There's not a lot of push for that kind of development. We have what we call a cozy culture. These quadrants are all about cultures. So a cozy culture is where we have people who have quite a consumer mindset. Perhaps they don't like to rock the boat. They want to keep the status quo. That's our cozy culture. Just keep things as they are, thanks very much. Opposite that, down here where we've got high challenge, but we've got low invitation, there's not a lot of nurturing and support going on, we have stressed culture. It can be quite task focused, quite function orientated. People in this quadrant might feel a little bit used at times. They might really notice that lack of relational input, that there's not much of a priority on that. And these two often go together. So if we were looking at congregations and you had a cozy culture for a congregation, chances are you've got 20% of the people, staff, volunteers, all paid, who are doing 80% of the work to serve 80% of the people who are consuming and not doing a lot to keep them cozy, so they go together. And then where we have low invitation and low challenged, we have bored culture, or if you want to put it really bluntly, maybe dying. So for us as leaders, it's about looking at this and assessing the groups that we're working with, the cultures in the group, where is it looking, but also where are we? And we will have a tendency to gravitate towards one of these in the way that we lead. We might be highly invitational, very nurturing, very supportive, but find giving a challenge quite hard to do. Or we might be more on the challenge side. We like to push people to keep developing and be a little less nurturing, and so it can feel quite pushy on the challenge side. But our aim is to know where we are so that we can then balance that out and consciously bring in the other side so that we're building this discipling, enabling culture. Another way for us as leaders to look at it, and this comes from, I think it's Karl Martin's book Lead, is the invitation. He calls this grace. And challenge he calls truth. And where we have high grace but low truth, we can end up over-protecting people. We're over-supporting and over-protecting. So we're not enabling them to grow into who they are. We're doing too much of the support for them so that they're not growing and learning how to become more of who God's calling them to be. Where we have high truth but low grace, we can dominate people. It's that telling the truth but missing out the love. Whereas this can be out of love, not telling the truth, or protecting them from the truth. And what we want to be aiming for is a really good balance of truth-telling and challenging, and a really good balance of grace, and then we liberate people. Know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. So this is what we're working towards. So our challenge today is to be thinking as leaders, where is our tendency? And so therefore, what do we consciously need to be working on? And it can be helpful to find out other people who have a tendency different to ourselves, and that helps us calibrate ourselves. So as well as identifying what your tendency is, challenge or invitation, it's also a helpful tool to look at this matrix and work out where you think you might be and where your congregation or the people you're working with are. And there's some roots I want to talk to you about how we move people or ourselves into the discipled culture. So if, for example, as a leader, you're in the stressed culture, we don't immediately jump over and become discipled. We actually go through what we call the valley of death, the valley of boredom, to move into a discipled culture. Often when we're stressed, we're working a bit on adrenaline, we're doing too much, we're fulfilling other people's expectations, but we've forgotten to listen to what is it that the Father is telling us and making that the most important thing. And often in our journey to be discipled, God calls us into rest and pruning. And so we go through a phase of stopping, which can feel a bit boring as the adrenaline drops, of pruning, before we move into a discipled and enabled culture. So for leaders, our way out of stress to discipled is this way round. For our congregations or our groups that are cozy, it's actually the opposite. They go through a different valley. And remember that Jesus leads us through the valley. So we're doing this with Jesus. But the cozy people will get to a place of boredom, and it's like we need to do something. But before they become discipled, they'll feel stressed because they've moved from being cozy to actually doing. It will feel a bit foreign, and so they go this way, getting into a discipled culture. So both of us have these different ways of working as we move into discipling culture, and it's normal and expected that we go through those journeys, but we're going through them with Jesus to become true disciples of Jesus who disciple others.